Now, the government staggers from Brexit vote to Brexit vote, precarious and confused, but still winning when it matters. Just when you think no political party could be in more of a mess over Brexit than the Tories, then up pops good old Jez's Labour Party to make you think again. Amid the shambles and vacillation in both major parties, the Leavers console themselves that we are still leaving, if not on anything like the terms they'd hoped. Most Remainers take comfort from that, reconciled to leaving, but on the softest of terms that makes rejoining the EU, well, not entirely out of the question at some stage. But the provisional wing of the Remainers wants no truck with such defeatist talk. It wants to reverse the referendum decision. It wants to reverse it now. What's more, it thinks we'd never have voted to leave in the first place if it hadn't been for those interfering pesky Ruskies. Here's Anthony Grayling with his take of the week.
There are many reasons for thinking that the outcome of the EU referendum is questionable. Now, one of them is outside interference, and especially Russian interference. After all, Russia has an interest in destabilizing the EU and probably would like to see it break up. Whipped by their party leaders, MPs can't vote on their conscience or judgment about what's in the best interests of the country. Instead, they're mindlessly waving Brexit through, the most gobsmacking harm that this country has ever inflicted on itself. No matter how confidently David Davis says that Brexit can't be reversed, it can be, and it will be. The reason why Brexiters oppose a people's vote on the final deal is because they know that if there is such a vote, Remain will win it. As Brexit crumbles under the weight of its own contradictions and allegations of corruption, voters are changing their minds. Halting Brexit is no longer a question of if, but of when.
What evidence is there that the Russians had any influence on the Brexit referendum?
Well, I think there's been some very remarkable investigative journalism done by The Observer, and it looks as though Mr. Banks, Mr. Wigmore, before the parliamentary committee, didn't deny that they'd been having lunches with the Russian ambassador.
But lots of people have lunch with the Russian ambassador. What is the evidence that the Russians attempted to influence the referendum?
Well, it will be very interesting to see indeed if the Home Secretary carries through with his suggestion that he might look at the possibility of criminal charges, for example. We might see some of the hard evidence that the investigative journalists have been digging up.
But you haven't got the evidence.
I don't myself, no.
But you've made the claim without the evidence.
No, I haven't made the claim myself.
No, you have. You've claimed that we wouldn't have even voted for Brexit if it hadn't been for the Russians.
Oh, that claim, yes.
So, but you have no evidence to back that up.
I do. I have evidence to suggest that the debate about the way the Leave campaign was run, about the overspending on the part of both wings of the Leave campaign, about the fact that the people who were involved in the Leave campaigns had a lot of contact with people outside the United Kingdom and especially in Russia. This begins to add up to a story which I said in that...
None of that's evidence at all. Not a single bit of evidence that would survive a minute in court.
Do you know, if you were talking to, say, a scientist in a laboratory who was looking at initial hypotheses and trying to work out where you might go to conduct an experiment, you would be following your nose about the suspicions that have been raised by a situation like this one.
Suspicions are one thing, evidence is the other. But anyway, let's move on. What do you make of the overall argument of the take?
Well, at least AC Grayling is honest enough to say that he wants to reverse the decision the British people has made by having another referendum, whereas many people who I think the same thing refuse to admit that that is what they're trying to do, to reverse the decision of the British people. Now, if you want to lecture people about democracy, it is perfectly clear that the British people were told that they would vote on once only. They were told that their vote would be decisive, that Parliament would then implement the decision that they made. All of that was absolutely unambiguous. I understand, I think you chaired a meeting at the European Commission yesterday, I understand that it is the European view that referendums should be held and held again and held again until the people produce the result that the establishment wants in the first place. This is what was done in the case of Denmark, in the case of France, in the case of Ireland. And it's come as a surprise to people like you in the European Commission that in Britain our democracy works on the basis that you tell people what the vote is about and then you trust them because we are a democracy.
Can we
now
take
the vote hasn't worked out the way that you wanted, and in your paternalistic way, you believe that the British people have got it wrong, and in your paternalistic way, you go on to tell the people that they must now vote for a second time.
All right, let her respond, please.
May we just unpick a few things there? Firstly, it wasn't the European Commission yesterday.
It was
a group of British Remainers meeting. We very often invite people from Parliament to come along and tell us what's going on. Be able to ask
You had
some
Mr.
questions.
Verhofstadt, didn't you?
It had nothing to do with the European Commission
was it
yesterday.
him you saw?
No. Oh, but that was months ago.
Okay.
You talk about the British people. I mean, this is such a canard. It was 37% of a restricted electorate. When the franchise was handed out for the EU referendum, people who had a genuine material interest in the outcome of it, our own expats, for example, EU citizens who live in this country, who are married to Brits, who bring their children up here and paying their taxes here, they weren't given a voice. And of that electorate...
But these were the rules.
Come on a second, I'm sorry.
These
you
were
want
the
facts.
rules.
You want facts. Of that electorate, 37% of that electorate voted to leave. Under what circumstances in any mature constitution could that count as a mandate for a major constitutional
You name any other decision
you talk about the British
made by
people.
16 million
That
people voting on a single day.
37% of the electorate is 26% of the population. So don't use the phrase the British people, because the British people haven't decided.
Let me bring Liz.
That's number one.
I want to bring...
final point. One final point, if I may.
Liz in.
We would love to have Liz in, but just one final point.
And she
In
will
a
indeed come in.
mature, sensible, grown-up democracy, our Parliament should have met after that. Our Parliament ought to have met after the referendum, and they should have asked themselves the following question. This was an explicitly advisory referendum.
No, it wasn't.
30%.
No, it wasn't.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm terribly sorry.
Parliament would implement.
Michael,
all right, I'm going to bring Liz. I'm
sorry. You've got to get. I'm sorry. You've got to get the facts right.
You don't get to dominate this.
I'm not.
You've already had your
I just
take.
want to get the facts
I want to bring
right.
Liz Kendall in.
Because people talk such a lot of BS about this.
All right. Well, people will make up their mind who's talking that. You want to reverse it.
I do.
How, in your view, is the most likely way that could happen?
With a people's vote on the final deal. Let the people...
A second referendum, but not like the first, in the sense that it will be on the deal itself rather than the principle.
Yeah, on the deal itself. Let's have a look and see whether what we've got at the moment as full members of the EU is going to be bettered by something. Let's see whether our economy is going to flourish under the new arrangements.
What would be wrong with that?
Well, it's not the deal that was done. And a moment ago, AC Grayling was saying that talking about the British people was nonsense and rubbish, and now he's saying that it should be the people's choice. But the people have already made a choice. And I was in this studio before the referendum, and I kept saying, you see, if the referendum goes the way the establishment doesn't want it, they'll soon be back saying there ought to be a second referendum, which is what they've done to every other European country. Because it's part of the bullying culture of the European Union that if a people defies what the establishment wants to do,
well,
they have to be bullied, they have to be punished, they have to be threatened.
Point.
In the general election,
I haven't talked about being bullied and threatened, which
in
we
the
are,
general
with things
election,
like being told we can't be in the Galileo project. And it's because of all this bullying and paternalism that you lost the referendum in the first place.
Hasn't Brexit, in a way, discombobulated you? I mean, you are a respected professor, but you've suggested that the government sent a Royal Navy frigate to the South China Sea so the Chinese could sink it and change the news agenda. You've called Brexiteers vermin, that's 17.4 million people. You call for a general strike to halt Brexit.
Okay, stop right there. I mean, look...
And you call for ultra-Remainers, you said they're being silenced by the forces of the state, which I guess is why you're not here tonight.
No, come on. I mean, this is absurd, honestly. I made a joke about the frigate, right? I didn't call the people who voted leave vermin. I said there were vermin. I named 4 people in the Conservative Party and 1 person outside it in UKIP, and I called them vermin. And on very good grounds. Why? Because Michael talks about bullying and paternalism and all the rest of it, whereas actually the Leave campaign, which you obviously are in favour of, lied through its teeth, made false promises,
so did the Remain
deceived.
campaign.
I'm sorry, they did not. Oh. And one very good reason why they didn't.
Top members of the government lied all the way through the campaign.
About what, Michael? Give us some lines.
For example,
£350 million for the National Health Service?
For example, the Chancellor of the Exchequer said it would be necessary to have a punishment budget immediately after the vote if we were to vote to leave. That was clearly not true.
But tonight, as we finish, How would you rate your chances of getting a second referendum?
I'm confident that if, firstly, I'm confident that a people's vote is more rather than less likely to happen. The dynamic is moving in that direction. I was visiting.
So you think it will happen?
Oh yeah, I'm hoping so.